Why do women's uniforms trend on social media more often than their world records? This video essay, Body Under Scrutiny, explores what they say is about the gender politics of women's sportswear.
It began with the everyday double standard. Men are talked about in terms of the tactics and performance, while women are praised or attacked for bikinis, leotards, hemline, and attitude.
Using examples from Olympic and Olympic adjacent sport, we show that this is not about individual taste, but about the structures that decide which bodies are acceptable to look at and how.
Undeniably, there is astonishing double standard in sport media. The male athletes are evaluated based on the functional performance, while the female athletes facing clothing scrutiny. Since the 19th century, when women were first allowed to participate in the Model Olympics Games, female athletes have been limited to the sport, such as tennis, croquet, golf, and equestrian activities. In these books, Schultz mentioned that the corset, dresses, and the shirt that covers the body from the neck down were the dress standard for the female athlete at that time. This dress constrains their movement, restricting them to the role appropriate to their gender. It was not until 1990s that the French tennis player Susanna Lindland rebelled, wearing a short-sleeved top and maxi skirts that come down to the calf. He won the 3 Olympics medals in the 1920s with a super batting prowess. However, his outfit was still called indecent by the British press. Unfortunately, this controversy has persisted into the 21st century. At the 2021 Europe Beach Handball Championship, the Norway's women's team was fined 1,500 euros, 150 euros per player, by the Europe Handball Federation for clothing problems, for wearing silent shorts rather than the mandatory 4-inch bikini bottoms. They were labeled in purple clothing. Conversely, men beach handball players have been allowed to wear t-shirts and shorts. Behind this lies a cruel paradox, where whether a woman's dress is covered or bare, someone always seems to find fault. As Erik Soder, president of the Norway's Volleyball Federation, lamented in 2021, this shouldn't even be an issue. This team rejected objectified dress choice and fell victims to the rules. This just confirms the tear between the woman's body autonomy and social expectation. This phenomenon even permeated the media's evaluation of the male and female athletes. According to a Twitter survey by Young et al., some seemingly neutral adjective description of the male and female athletes may carry gender connotations. Words like the dedicated, hardworking, and talented are associated with men's athletes, while the female athletes are more often evaluated as the pretty and girls. Such difference perpetuates sexism in the overt and the subtle ways. This is because the media often match text and images with the expectation and desires of the audience, attracting readers while promoting gender stereotype. Moreover, the continued over-sexualization of the women's uniforms by the media can devote the public attention from their aesthetics, ability, or achievement. This is women's skills have earned them the place on the global stage, but they have been troubled by the ill-fitting and criticized uniforms affecting their game tempo and mental health. These facts reinforce that the true sporting justice requires the athletes to be judged by their skill and not their hemlines. In particular, how Adidas views the female athletes through media's lessons have now becoming a serious issue.
Building on the double standard discussed earlier, this section asks how sports media decide what is worth looking at and why women's bodies so often become the visual center of the coverage. Drawing on Laura Murray's visual pleasure and narrative cinema, I treat the gaze as a structured relation between 3 looks: the camera's looks, the looks exchanged on screen, and the spectator's looks. Murray argues that these looks are typically organized around the male subject position so that women appear as passive images rather than active bearers of the look. Freud's notion of scopophilia and Lacan's mirror stage shows how visual pleasure depends on turning others into controllable objects and on identifying with a powerful ego ideal. Psychoanalysis for Murray is not a cure for inequality, but a political tool to expose how this visual order works. Applied to sports, this framework helps explain why women athletes so often occupy a dual role. They must perform as athletes and simultaneously function as spectacles to be looked at. In 2018, it published portrayal guidelines for gender-balanced representation for all Olympic stakeholders, followed by an updated version ahead of Tokyo 2020, explicitly calling for gender-equal, fair, and inclusive portrayal in broadcast, digital, and print communication. These guidelines and the way they have been reported in the media stress that camera operators should avoid unnecessary close-ups of athletes' breasts, buttocks, or crotch shots, and instead focus on performance and sports contexts. Recent Olympic adjacent advertising still amplifies this pattern. Blue Bella's 2024 Strong is Beautiful campaign posts Team GB Women's Rugby Sevens Olympians on the pitch in lace lingerie, foregrounding tongue limbs and underwear styling, while any recognizable rugby disappeared from view. By contrast, campaigns built around male Olympians, such as Under Armour's royal self Michael Phelps, keep athletes in motion, in uniform, and in clearly identifiable training situations, presenting their near-naked bodies primarily as instruments of discipline, endurance, and performance. Taken together, these examples show how women athletes are consistently bodied, while men are technicalized. Women are framed for how they appear, men for what they do. This leads directly to the next section question. If looking is structured in this way, who has the power to structure it and through which institutions and rules?
When people argue about what female athletes should or shouldn't wear, it often sounds like we are talking about personal preference. But in reality, what women wear in sports is rarely their own choices. The question isn't what are they wearing, it's who gets to decide. In modern sports, that decision is shaped by three powerful forces: official rules, broadcast media, and commercial sponsors. Together, they create a system where women's body constantly regulated. Foucault explains that modern power doesn't control people through violence, but through discipline, through rules, norms, and constant surveillance that shape how our bodies should behave or appear. And the sports federations are a perfect examples of this. They require tight, high-cut, or form-fitting uniforms in gymnastics, volleyball, and beach handball. On paper, these rules sound technical, but in practice, they control how female bodies must be displayed in competition. When men hold decision-making power, whether federation officials, coaches, media executives, or sponsors stands for women's bodies inevitably reflect gendered assumptions. Female athletes on the face become a side of control, not a choice. The issue isn't whether women should wear longer shorts or tighter lotus is who gets to decide for them. Media adds another layer of control. Broadcasters prioritize visual engagement, often zooming in on women's bodies instead of their performance. These norms influence federations to design uniforms that meet what social media considers watchable. Sponsors also impact sportswear. Brand promote stylized, sexualized, or fashionable driven images, encouraging athletes to wear outfits that align with corporate aesthetics. Contract clauses, photo shoots, and visual branding make athletes maintain a certain look to stay visible and funding. Rasmussen et al. Shows that even when men and women appear equally in ads, women are portrayed as decorative, while men are framed as powerful. According to Sauber, sports media similarly show men as strong and serious, while women are often posed smiling or sexualized, which distracts from athletic identity. Sure, some athletes love wearing fitted uniforms and feel confident in them, but not everyone does. And that's the point. Women shouldn't have to just to satisfy officials, cameras, or sponsors. They should be able to choose what they feel comfortable and powerful in. Because at the end of the day, this isn't a debate about fashion. It's a debate about freedom, agency, and who gets to make decisions about women's bodies. The conclusion asks what would change if we treated women athletes first and foremost as workers of high skill and discipline. If rules, coverage, and sponsorship centered performance instead of pleasing bodies, sportswear could become a space of autonomy, not control. The real contest, we argue, should take place on the track, court, or pitch, not on women's bodies.